Alright, let's see if that did it. Can anybody see or hear me right now? Let me know. Alright, excellent. How's the audio too? Is it at a good level? Loud and clear? Beautiful. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Paleontologizing. I am back from hiatus. I'm here in western Wyoming right now. In fact, at Western Wyoming Community College. And we're going to be taking a look at some really cool fossil displays that they happen to have here at this beautiful little community college. I'm currently on my way out to the Badlands of Wyoming near the town of Green River to do field work, to do what many paleontologists do during the summer. Just go out and collect specimens, collect data, and try and drive our discipline forward by finding new specimens. So I'm really excited. This is something I look forward to every single year. It's a big part of my, big part of my life is going out and doing field work. And I'm really excited to be able to bring you along for the ride for the next month. The whole month of June, I'm going to be out in the field digging up dinosaurs, and it's such a privilege to be able to share that with all of you. Anyway, we happen to have some fossils on display right here that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But let me turn auto rotate off. Let's see, let's get rid of those tabs and pull up the chat here. Anyway, hope everybody's having a great day so far. And again, I'm sorry for not having streamed in the last week, but it's a long drive from the Bay Area out here to western Wyoming, but here we are. But yeah. Oh, and Docent Play says, hello from Poland. I'm new here, and I love dinosaurs too. Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Paleontologizing. For anybody else who might be new, let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Danny Anduza. I'm a dinosaur paleontologist, and I'm here on Twitch trying to do some good old-fashioned science outreach. So normally, that entails, well, not normally, for a big part of the year, that entails me sitting in my office, on my computer, streaming from there, going over new scientific publications, new papers in paleontological journals, maybe interviewing other paleontologists remotely via Zoom, doing a ton of Q&A and all kinds of other good stuff too, but it's summertime. June 1st is what, tomorrow? During the summer, I go out and do field work. I've been doing that since 2011. Nearly every summer in the field. Looking forward to doing that again this year. We're going to be spending, looks like in total, more than 2 months in the field this summer. And, that starts this afternoon when we go out and set up camp out in the Badlands. I'm going to be streaming as close to every day as is feasible for the next month here in western Wyoming. But on my way out there, thought I'd show you around some of the cool displays here at the museum. So we'll walk around in just a minute here. But Claire Burr, how are you doing? Hello. Golganek, Rhacodactylus, Alexander Morrison, Sigourney W. Hello everyone. Halle Berry, what's shaking with you, Halle? Good to see you. Polyot, how are you? Good stuff. And Lordy, how are you doing, Lordy? I hope you're having a good time at home right now. Without further ado, let's take a look at some of these displays. We did a stream from here 2 years ago. That would have been 2023. And I didn't actually manage to show off all of the different displays here. So we've got, let's see, I think 4 different mounted dinosaur skeletons. There is a Stegosaurus and a Triceratops. There's a Camptosaurus and a Tyrannosaurus. I'll be showing off all of those. Plus an enormous Elasmosaur, like one of the biggest ones in the world. And we've got some other little things over here too, so we'll be taking a look at all of these. Let's get started. Put this on. Let's go mobile here. Make sure my camera strap stays on. Or phone strap, rather. But man, I've been so excited for this summer. this is, believe it or not, how I make my living, is doing science outreach full time. And doing fieldwork live streams is something that I've always dreamed of being able to do, and now we get to do it. So very, very excited about that. It's going to be a good summer. Let's first off take a look at some of these fossil fishes over here. So I said we're going to be doing fieldwork near the town of Green River. This part of the world is famous for its fish fossils. And you see a couple of those right here. I think these are actually, yeah, those are not cast. Those are originals from the Green River Formation. So, again, Western is a mecca for fish fossils like this. Chances are if you see a fossil anywhere in the world, there's like maybe a 50-50 shot that it comes from this part of Wyoming, from the Green River Formation. We've got a lovely ray-finned fish. You can see the vertebrae right there. This is a really big one, too. See all the ribs. It's kind of flattened and fallen apart, but you can actually see some of the tooth rows right there. We might be talking about this later this summer when we go to Turtle Hill and find some more of the fishes there. But fish have all of these, ray-finned fish like this especially, have all of these really intricate bones in their skull. And after they die, they often fall apart. So it can be kind of difficult to decipher, but you can see right there, look closely, and you can see some of those teeth. Big old operculum back there, one of the big skull bones, and then the fin rays are really well preserved too. I like that it doesn't seem like these, this is one fossil by the way, part and counterpart. They kind of split along bedding planes like that. And so that's actually how you find them when you go to places like Green River, Wyoming. And you can actually go there and, you pay a few dollars and you get to work in the quarry. And oftentimes you get to keep whatever you find, too. But as you're doing that, you're pulling up these big chunks of rock, and then you're often using a hammer and chisel and trying to split along those bedding planes. It'll open up almost like the pages of a book. And if you get lucky, it splits perfectly along the fossil itself. So that's exactly what happened here. It creates kind of a weak spot there in the rock, and you can exploit that and get this beautiful kind of, Anyhow, and the lens has some dust or something? Okay, here, give me a second. I think I might have a wipe if people are commenting on the video quality. There we go. Put this in here. Alright, hang on a second. Hold still, chat. I'll wipe you down here. There we go. Is that a noticeable improvement? We happy now? And how are you doing? I'm doing well, Halle Berry. Really, really good. Excited to be able to do some more fieldwork streams. And the smudge is still there? That's just going to be a scratch on the lens then. Shoot. Well, you're going to have to deal with it. I'm sorry. It's going to be there for the next month, so get used to it. Yeah. Anywho. So these fossil fishes from the Green River Formation, these are from the Eocene. So they're from one of the early time slots in the age of mammals. So these are about 50 million years old. That's about 14 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, except for birds, of course. So these are from the Cenozoic, the age of mammals, the Eocene period in particular, and or Eocene stage, I guess you would say. But yeah, just trying to start off with a little hors d'oeuvre here. Some lovely fossil fishes. And these are some of the few genuine fossils that we're going to see on display here today. Much of what we're going to see are, and 14 million, so just a short time then, says Pauliot. I mean, yeah, the extinction at the end of the Cretaceous was 66 million years ago. These are from 50 million years ago, so kind of shortly thereafter. And this is from a time when Wyoming was, much like it was during much of the Mesozoic, almost a tropical environment. we'll see hints of that in some of the other fossils as we move on. But yeah, there were all kinds of tropical plants and animals living right here in western Wyoming. The climate was a lot warmer and wetter back then. And it's just kind of a how much things change over tens of millions of years, you know? Theme on our planet Earth is the only constant is change. One of the reasons why paleontology is so important. Yeah. Anywho, good stuff. Warmer is a work in progress. There you go, Paul. Yeah. Good stuff. Let's continue on past our Eocene fishes onto some slightly more impressive stuff, maybe. Here's an animal that you might think of as being almost tropical, a warm weather animal, and yet this is from right here in western Wyoming. This is a fossil alligator. So we'll be finding bits and pieces of these guys throughout the rest of June, I suspect. So this is a nice little way to kind of familiarize ourselves with the anatomy here. So one of these things that's really difficult, impossible to miss really, is the texture on those scutes there, these osteoderms, the armor plating on this guy. And so they've got this really characteristic texture. It's kind of pockmarked like that. You see that texture and you know that you were dealing with a crocodiliform, one of these crocodile relatives. This actually, I think, is a member of Alligatoridae, so it's part of the alligator family. We're in the Cenozoic at this point. This is also from the Green River Formation. But you can see even onto the skull bones, you've got that same kind of texture right there. Really, really cool. Yeah. Lots of bone in that skull? Absolutely, Claireberry, yeah. So crocodilians like this, they're specially adapted for chomping. And we can't quite see it there. Some of the teeth are actually missing out of the sockets. You can see the sockets right along here, but there's one big tooth right there. Oftentimes in the back of their jaws, these guys have got these teeth that are not so much sharp as they are rounded, almost ball-like. These big round teeth at the back of the jaw, and that's what these guys would use for crushing up shells, especially from critters like turtles. So we'll see evidence of that in just a second over here. Little teeth. But we want to spend some time with our alligator friend. And what's neat is you could see the underside of what I think are the belly osteoderms there too. Or rather the top of the belly osteoderms. So this guy's squashed flat, but beautifully preserved. Pretty sure this is also from the Green River Formation. It doesn't say that there. I guess this is a private specimen on loan to the college. But pretty darn cool. Pretty darn cool. I love seeing the limb bones as well. Really long metatarsals here. I didn't realize their metatarsals are so long. Move down the tail, and the osteoderms seem to disappear as we move up the tail. I wonder if that's that these guys just didn't have a lot of armor plating on their tails, or maybe more likely that part crept away, or maybe the preservation wasn't great. As you can see, they kind of peter out, those armor plates, until we get to here. So there's a chance that that somebody who was working on this, who was cleaning the matrix away from the fossil, just kind of dug straight through those osteoderms. It happens sometimes. And it would be a shame on such a beautiful specimen, but, well, you know, sometimes it happens. But very nice. And again, I want to emphasize, we're right here in the middle of a community college, like, student union building. This is really cool that they've got these fossils on display here. I'm a little bit jealous. Like, what a beautiful campus, and given that it's summertime, there's almost nobody here. It's, like, almost eerily quiet. I'm trying to keep my voice down so as to not be obnoxious, but, yeah. And let's see here. No summer students? Maybe not yet, Claire. I don't know if they have summer classes here, but if they do, they haven't started yet, it would seem. This is probably not too long after the end of spring semester. Zenron says, are we crowdfunding to start InGen? No, that ship has sailed. But welcome, Zenron. My name is Danny Anduza. I'm a dinosaur paleontologist, and I'm here showing off some cool fossil displays at Western Wyoming Community College. Before, later this afternoon, we go out into the Badlands, and I'm going to help set up camp, and I and a bunch of other paleontologists and volunteers are going to be digging up dinosaurs for the next month, and I'm going to be trying to stream every single day. So stay tuned. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. And Elias, thank you so much for the 7 months of support. I really appreciate it. Yeah. I've seen that paper. I've not seen that yet, Dr. Tara. No, I've been so busy. Like, I just got into Salt Lake a couple days ago. I've been helping Ethan and co get everything all set up, get all the supplies packed up, that kind of thing. And now here we are. I've arrived a little bit in advance of the rest of the caravan, so I might get a call from Ethan at some point during the stream, and I might have to wrap it up so I can go meet them at the Bureau of Land Management office.
Ontogeny.
Yeah. But it's good to be streaming again. It's been too long, I feel. Yeah. And is Matt going to be there this year, says Paleontologist VA? Yeah, I think he shows up in a few days. Yeah. Anywho, this right here, let me get closer to give you a proper sense of scale. Can anybody tell me what kind of turtle this is? Any guesses? What is this critter right here? Oh, and that is super cool, Halle Berry. Well, congratulations. Well done. Pleistocene javelina. Very, very cool. Did the right thing, Halle Berry. That's awesome. It's so cool your name's going to be on it, too. So, yeah. And Docent Play, you are correct. That is the... A lot of joke answers in there. But, yeah, Docent, you got it. This is a soft-shell turtle. It's shell, not so soft anymore. But this is from the group of turtles that we call Trionychids, and they're still around today. So soft-shell turtles are still part of Trionychidae, this pretty successful family of turtles. They go back to at least the late Cretaceous, if not earlier. And some of them get really, really big, especially during the Eocene. Now, Trionychid turtles have got a pretty distinctive shell texture that it's funny, this doesn't really remind me of typical Trionychid texture here. But yeah, so these are freshwater turtles, not saltwater turtles, freshwater. So these guys existed alongside dinosaurs during the Cretaceous, and then they actually survived that extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous period, and they continue on until today. So a real success story here. Really weird looking skull with that prominent sagittal crest right there. Big old orbits, eye sockets there. And that tail is interesting. Pretty strong transverse processes on the tail. So those projections that go out laterally from the tail, from the vertebrae there. Muscle attachment, presumably. And we'll be seeing that in another critter in a little bit, too. So, pretty neat. Yeah. And then this one right here is a little baby Trionychid. I don't know if it's the same genus and species. It might be or it might not be. This one right here is a cast, so it's an exact replica, molded and cast from a real thing. But look at those right there. There's what almost looks like a hole right there, and kind of right there too. Anybody have any guesses what that might represent? What might be going on right there? Polyotsis looks like something took a chomp. Yeah, you are correct. No, not a bullet hole beater, Steve. But, yeah. Probably the work of a crocodilian. Maybe an alligator. It would have to be significantly bigger than this guy in order to leave holes that diameter. But, yeah, it looks like this little turtle got chomped. It happens, you know? Next door neighbor did that damage to his Alexander Morrison. Yeah, I think so. uh, yeah, when you're only dealing with the fossilized remains of these creatures that lived tens of millions of years ago, it can be difficult to try and figure out what kind of lifestyles they led. What are they doing in their environment? Who's eating whom? And how are these creatures interacting during their lifetimes? Sometimes you get really lucky and you just get something like this, like those holes in the shell that tell you, yep, this guy got chomped by a gator, just like turtles get chomped by gators today. And if you wanted to, you could compare this to, turtles who met an unfortunate demise in the jaws of an alligator. And you could see that they match up perfectly. So, crocs and turtles still doing the same thing today that they were doing 50 million years ago. It's pretty darn cool. I wonder what the largest freshwater turtle today is. If we have any trionychids that are even close to this big. I don't know enough about modern freshwater turtles. But this guy is pretty impressive. I mean, look at that skull right there. That's bigger than the skull of most sea turtles that I've seen. That is impressive. It really is. And this is also a cast. Yeah, that's got to be plaster there. But really nice. And I don't know if the molding and casting process really captured the distinct texture that I'm used to for trionychids. So that might be part of why I'm a little bit like, ooh, I don't know about this one, Doesn't feel trionychid-y, but I'm not really a turtle guy. At least not yet. Maybe you'll be publishing on turtles in the future. But yeah. And the Yangtze giant softshell turtle is smaller than this one, Claire? Wow, nice. Oh yeah, and we did see one of those there, didn't we, Claire? Very cool. Yeah, those guys are so neat. But yeah, smaller than this, and presumably they get bigger than this too, in the Eocene. So, yeah, would have been a good time to be a turtle, Western Wyoming would have been a paradise for turtles and crocs and all kinds of critters like that. Cool to think about. Pretty cool to think about. And Crystal Alpaca, thank you so much for the 32 months of support. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Good stuff. So right now we're operating off of the Wi-Fi here. Cross your fingers that it holds. I've been really impressed with the speed, actually. And, yeah, where's our Xiphactinus, that giant saltwater fish? I think it's over here. Later on, we're going to go see the Tyrannosaurus skeleton over there. And we're going to see Camptosaurus here. But I figure, let's eat our vegetables first. Let's take a look at this pretty impressive non-dinosaur, non-tetrapod, in fact. This is Xiphactinus. And this is the actual specimen, too. This is not a cast. This is the deal here. Really impressive.
Ontogeny.
This is one of the largest finned fishes that's ever during the Jurassic. This guy is from the Cretaceous. And it was a resident of, you could say, the Western Interior Seaway. So from about, 100 million years ago until the end of the Cretaceous, there was this seaway in the middle of North America. So it covered much of Wyoming, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Montana, the Dakotas, just basically cutting the North American continent in two. And it would have been a fairly shallow, probably averaging around between 600 and 900 feet deep, so pretty shallow. Modern day Mediterranean, or maybe even the Caribbean would be a better analogy. There's all kinds of different critters swimming around in there. And, yeah, it was the host to all kinds of really, really interesting animals. including this Xiphactinus. So this really reminds me of a tarpon, which is, it's a critter I encountered for the first time when I was in Puerto Rico just a few weeks ago. A tarpon is another ray-finned fish, and it's got this mouth arranged in much the same way. Kind of opens like that. They're often eating things that fall into the water, or they're active too. They're pretty formidable carnivores, and they get up to what, like 8 feet long, something like that?
Ontogeny.
This one here, I think, is over 15 feet long. And as far as I know, the fishes like Xiphactinus aren't actually related to tarpon. Not closely related, at least, but they've kind of independently hit upon the same sort of body plan. It's a good example of what we call convergent evolution, where if you're, two different critters that are unrelated to each other, if they're doing a similar ecological job, if they've got a similar lifestyle, they're eating similar prey, living in a similar environment, they'll often evolve to look superficially very similar. And they'll have a lot of the same adaptations, like a big toothy mouth that opens like this. Yeah, look at those teeth right there. Just truly impressive. Neat. And you see the sclerotic ring there too. That is the eye. The eye would be supported by those bones. And like we were seeing with our green river fish back there, you've also got the big operculum and all these kind of fiddly skull bones in here. And then look at all of those vertebrae. Again, it's got that classic ray-finned fish kind of set up there to the vertebrae. Yeah, if I were to pick up a vertebra like that, I would instantly know, yeah, this is a ray-finned fish. Very distinctive. And that tail, you can actually see some of the fin rays right there. Pretty neat. Just imagine how fast this fish would be able to swim. It's like, this is about the size of like a white shark, like Carcharodon carcharocles. And yet it's a ray-finned fish, not a shark. This guy would have probably eaten small sharks and a lot of the other critters swimming around at that time. This would have been one of the top predators in the sea, and in turn would have been preyed upon by some of the larger mosasaurs. These giant aquatic reptiles, marine lizards rather. Yeah, so this would be on the like Tylosaurus maybe, Hanosaurus, etc. Pretty, yeah. Yeah, and then diagonal, you are correct. We've got a palm frond over here. I'll try and show it to you in such a way that But this is this an original or is this a cast? I'm not entirely sure. It's so beautiful and perfect that it almost looks like a cast. Yeah, I think this one might very well be a cast, but that's okay. This is from here in western Wyoming. This is from the Green River Formation. And again, it's proof that this area was tropical 50 million years ago. You don't have palms like this growing in Wyoming today. They would not be very happy with Wyoming winters, for one. It's also in a place like this to support this kind of plant life. But back at the time, it was much warmer and much wetter. Really cool. And then here you've got some of those fossil fishes as well. Again, this is from 50 million years ago, so Xiphactinus here I think is from about 90 million years ago, and I want to say the specimen is from Kansas or Nebraska or something like that. But this is from right here in Wyoming, from about 50 million years ago. And you see some more of these ray-finned fishes here. This might be Nicia, which probably the most common of all of the Green River fishes. But just gorgeous. No, I don't think this is a cast. I think this is the original right here. Parts of this may have been painted in order to make it look a little bit more perfect, because it is just gorgeous. Like it's almost mind-boggling. I almost feel like it has to have been gussied up a little bit. Yeah. There you go, Crimson Carnotaurus, yeah. Very nice. Just look at the detail on that fish. All these fiddly little parts in there. Just beautiful. Very nice. Very nice indeed. And then we've got some fossils here as well. This is almost certainly local. Probably Cretaceous, I would imagine. A lot of the rocks around here are Cretaceous. That's why we're going to be near Green River and those Cretaceous rocks. But, yeah, pretty neat. And we had a question from Docent, too, whether or not this was related to barracuda, and I don't think it is. So this is an osteichthyon fish. It's a bony fish, and it is an actinopterygian, a ray-finned fish. But I don't think these guys are close relatives of barracuda. Someone can look up Xiphactinus on Wikipedia and see if there's anything on there about their phylogeny and the way they've been classified. But I don't think they're related to barracuda, and I don't think they're even closely related to tarpon, despite looking very, very similar. Are they thought to be related to swordfish? I'm not sure. The tail does remind me a lot. But, yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I don't work on ray-fin fishes, dinosaurs. Yeah. How big would the difference of length in rock formation between 90 and 50 million years be? It depends, doesn't play. So that's the thing when we're talking about geology and about how old the rocks are. Rocks only get deposited in what we call depositional environments. So only where you've got sediment being laid down do you have rocks being formed. And there's no place on our planet where there's a complete history of the rocks all in one place. Earth is a very dynamic planet. There's a lot of things going on. There's lots of conditions changing locally from place to place. And so you might have big gaps in the rock record in certain areas. What we call unconformities, where there's just like missing time. So yeah, we've got a few of those around here where it just jumps straight from the Cretaceous to the Eocene. Yeah. And in different places, like you may have had an ancient valley that just filled up with sediments. You've got a very complete record for a certain length of time, and then it just stops because that basin fills up. There's no longer rock being deposited, and so your rock record essentially, might have a big gap before it becomes a depositional environment again. I hope I'm explaining this well. So anywho, the point is that sometimes you can get a ton of rock deposited in one area, and it might only be a few 100,000 years or something. And sometimes you can get a really narrow band of rock that might represent tens of millions of years. So deposition is not a constant thing. There's a lot of factors that go into making it a little bit more haphazard than that. So it's really important to be able to date the rocks using the fossils in them, and also using radiometric dating. Being able to look at, see how they've been decaying, that tells you how old the rocks are. Just looking at the thickness of the rocks can throw you off, because, rock beds can be really, really thick and not actually represent that much time. Though, it depends. Yeah. Cool. And Wikipedia says the order to which Xiphactinus belongs is extinct. That makes sense. Yeah. But you can see how this is just such a successful body plan. Like, there have been multiple times when different species have evolved a very similar kind of shape. You've got it in Xiphactinus and its relatives, and you've got it in tarpon, and I'm sure there's other groups too that I'm not even aware of. But having an upwards facing mouth like that with big wicked teeth, it's something special. You can see how this is a really successful kind of body plan, where it's evolved multiple times in different lineages. Pretty cool. Yeah. Speaking of successful body plans, one of these dinosaurs that I think doesn't get nearly enough attention last summer, actually, with Karen Poole, who it sounds like she might be on our field crew again this year in Utah, later in July. But this, everybody else, is an ornithopod. This is Camptosaurus, which is one of these beaky plant-eating dinosaurs. So we're going way, way, way back in time now. So this is about 140, 150 million years old from the Morrison Formation, when you had dinosaurs like Apatosaurus, aka Brontosaurus, and Stegosaurus, and Allosaurus, and Diplodocus all walking around. Camptosaurus is one of their neighbors. Camptosaurus is from the same environment, from the Morrison Formation. Yeah. Let's see here. And is the, are we having issues with the Wi-Fi? Give me a second here. Let me check on this. What are we at? Let's see. Oh, we're doing okay. Yeah, just tiny stutters? Yeah. We're going to have a lot of those this summer, I think, with the satellite internet. So yeah, don't get too discouraged there. Anywho, Camptosaurus. This is kind of a precursor to the duckbill dinosaurs that come in the late Cretaceous. Camptosaurus is kind of a pioneer in this area. Like, hey, let's be a beaky herbivore. We're going to start chewing our food rather than just swallowing it whole. Maybe living in social groups, but not really having any huge spikes or teeth or anything like that. It's just our wits. That's what these guys seem to do. And so these evolved from small two-legged plant-eating dinosaurs, from things that would have looked a lot like the contemporary Dryosaurus. But Camptosaurus is starting to bulk up, starting to get beefy, and starting to maybe start walking on all fours as well. So from bipedal ancestors to these bigger, bulkier, possibly quadrupedal or facultatively quadrupedal critters like Camptosaurus, we're starting to see this is a trend that will continue into the Cretaceous, and these guys will just run wild with that. But you can see the hands here, and I actually have a cast of this same specimen at home, just the hand. But 5 fingers right there. Thumb, first finger, middle finger, ring finger, pinky finger. But you can see how the unguals, the claws on there, are starting to develop into hoofs, almost like for weight bearing. And later descendants of these guys, and later members of this same group, that thumb claw right there will turn into more of a spike. And then you end up with like Iguanodon with that big formidable spike on the thumb. These guys are not there yet, but they seem to kind of be trending in that direction. And again, we can talk about that with Karen Poole later on in the summer. But yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, the prototypes. Yeah, you can think of this as almost like a prototype for later iguanodont dinosaurs, and then later than that, the duckbill dinosaurs, the hadrosaurs. But Camptosaurus was doing this way back in the Jurassic. It was probably pretty successful. This might be one of the very few groups of dinosaurs that don't go extinct at the end of the Jurassic in North America. We'll be talking about that with Jim Kirkland later on in the summer, but yeah, shoot. At the end of the Jurassic, nearly all of the North American lineages of dinosaurs seem to get wiped out. And there may have even been an asteroid impact responsible for that at the end of the Jurassic, at the beginning of the Cretaceous. But anyway, most of your big sauropods die out. It seems like maybe most of your big theropod dinosaurs die out in North America. But Camptosaurus might make it through, because there are very Camptosaurus-like dinosaurs from the very beginning of the Cretaceous in North America. So these might have been some of the lucky survivors. So again, this is a sign of things to come, and yeah, that may have just a simple kind of body plan. Don't have the the huge osteoderms like you have on stegosaurs. You don't have the super long necks and tails like on sauropods. These guys are just kind of simple, basic herbivores. And that may have been the key to their survival at the end of the Jurassic. We don't know. Still figuring out a lot of this stuff. And Dawson Place says, so Parasaurolophus, Maiasaura, or Edmontosaurus, or his descendants? Potentially, yeah. It's really difficult to try and find direct ancestor-descendant relationships in paleontology. Although we're starting to maybe figure out some of that stuff out for dinosaurs. But anyhow, think of this as the close cousin to the ancestors of the duckbill dinosaurs, like you were mentioning. Yeah. So this is, it's the great uncle maybe of Parasaurolophus. I want to point out something else here too. Elias says the hipster iguanodon being one before it was cool. Kind of, yeah. Yeah. The skull here, take a look at this, is wrong. Some of you may have seen Camptosaurus skeletons in museums. This is kind of an older one. This might actually be a cast of the one that used to be at the Los Angeles County Museum. In fact, it might be the same exact pose. And if you do an image search for Camptosaurus and Allosaurus skeleton, there's this famous display that they used to have at LACM in Los Angeles, with a Camptosaurus looking behind him like this, and there's an Allosaurus kind of crouched, looking back at him right over there. This might be the same one. But the skull is incorrect. This goes way back to the Bone Wars. Othniel Charles Marsh, Taurus, and he didn't have a skull for the original skeleton. But there was somebody who found a skull at a place called Garden of the Gods in Colorado. And it looked like, Marsh thought, it might belong to Camptosaurus. And so he popped it on there. And so for years and years and years, you've got this long, low-slung skull like this. Almost looks like a classic Stegosaurus type skull on this animal. And recent study has shown that this skull almost certainly does not belong to Camptosaurus. That site at Garden of the Gods in Colorado isn't even Jurassic in age. It seems to be from the Cretaceous. And so we've got the skull of a Cretaceous ornithopod dinosaur here on the body of a Jurassic ornithopod dinosaur. The skull for Camptosaurus should look much more like this. Here we go. I saved this just for you, chat, to show you. So, yeah, much less kind of rectangular than this skull right here. Much more pointy kind of snout, bigger eye socket. Yeah. Hopefully the camera's picking this up okay. But yeah, that should be what our Camptosaurus skull looks more like. And I've got one of these at home, 3D printed. So I wonder if they'll ever change that out here. I don't know. It takes time and money to do this kind of thing, and they already have a nice looking skull on this, so maybe they'll just use it as a teachable moment. But yeah, pretty neat. Yeah. Somewhat bird-like in comparison to that cast. I know, right, Molt? Yeah. Anyhow, and here's a kind of old-fashioned reconstruction of what Camptosaurus might look like, but kind of basic beaky plant ornithischian dinosaur. The tail is probably bending way too much right there, which is kind of funny. But been held out behind the animal for balance and life, also muscle attachment. You see the transverse, these bones jutting out laterally from the caudal vertebrae. Those are for attachment to the caudofemoralis muscle. So you see that bump on the back of the thigh bone there? Go midway down the shaft and there's that bump right there. That's the fourth trochanter. And so there would be muscles stretching from that to these projections on the side of the tail. It would have helped the animal walk around. A very efficient way of moving, where like the tail is swishing from side to side a little bit, and that's helping the helping the walk cycle essentially for this animal, making it more efficient to swing the legs back and forth. Yeah. Pretty neat. The name Camptosaurus means bent lizard, and I think that's in reference to the femur, how it's got kind of a gentle bend to it. Of course, Marsh named this before he really knew what the whole animal looked like. A lot of dinosaur names are like that, especially from that period in paleontology, like from the late 1800s. You'd only find a few bits and pieces, and then, give it a name based on that when it turns out there's some remarkable thing about the animal that you don't know about yet that would have made a much better name. Think about the name Allosaurus. The name means different lizard. It's like the most basic, boring name for such an incredibly interesting, cool animal. But it was based on, I think, pretty fragmentary remains to start with, and so I gave it kind of a basic name. Yeah. Anyhow. Good stuff. Peter Steve says, I wonder if there are paleontologists who are animators, because it seems like they know how animals move, which is good for animating movements. Sure, yeah. And there are paleontologists who, that's what they work on, is trying to figure out how animals like this would have moved by looking at their skeletons, looking at muscle scars on the bones, and also looking at modern animals for clues as well. Probably the best known paleontologist who does this would be John Hutchinson. I think he might work in the UK now, but yeah, he's done a lot of work on, how fast could certain dinosaurs run, like, for instance, Tyrannosaurus, whom we'll be seeing in a little bit. How much muscle mass did they have? What is their range of motion and their joints and that kind of thing? These are questions that we can answer with careful study and with good fossils. But first, you got to go out and actually find the fossils first. And you all will be seeing how that's done in just a few days. Yeah. I'm very excited to discuss this with you in real time as we go out there into the field and start digging dinosaurs. Anyhow, should we go see the T-Rex right now? I think we should, yeah. We've got, oh, and this is neat. Is that like a Foucault's pendulum there? Yeah, pretty neat. I'm thoroughly impressed with the facilities here at Western Wyoming Community College. I mean, look at this. We had a community college near where I grew up, Diablo Valley Community College, and it did not have this kind of personality, this kind of, these kinds of facilities. It's impressive. This is really neat. And they've got a lovely full-size cast of a Tyrannosaurus over here. To figure out who is this specimen, there are around about 50 different Tyrannosaurus specimens that have been found and publicized at this point, and they've all got their own little personality quirks. With this one here, it feels like a composite. It feels like there's multiple specimens that contributed parts to this. The skull right here looks to me a lot like AMNH 5027, which is the famous one at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. It's also the one in the Jurassic Park logo. I think that's this one right here. It looks a lot like 5027. The forelimbs look different, though, like they're from a different specimen. They might even be sculpted. Really, really big arms on this one. For a Tyrannosaurus, those arms are much bigger than I'm used to seeing. And the tail, I think there are two in the tail. This reminds me a lot of the mount at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science in Denver, Colorado. That one's kind of famous for its pose, where it's rearing leg and, kicking like a showgirl. I've heard it described as the Rockette T-Rex before. And the one on there, the tail is like way too long. I'm sure that's the case with this guy as well. There's just too many vertebrae in there. Because the tail should not be that long. It should be about 1/3 shorter. But pretty neat. Would the tail really curve up like that? No, I don't think so. I think this tail is way too bendy. They're trying to get it to fit in this space, and that's a perennial problem when you're trying to mount a dinosaur skeleton. And that's about where you've got limited space. How do you get it to fit? And so sometimes you have to contort the tail, make it curve way too much, that kind of thing. But the tail on these guys probably would have been fairly stiff. Again, you've got those big transverse processes coming off the sides, projecting out laterally from the tail. Those would have been muscle attachment going to, again, you can see the fourth trochanter here. On the femur? That, and look at how it is. I don't know if you can see the texture on it, but it's really kind of a rough texture. That's muscle attachment. So muscles would have run from there to those transverse processes. And if the leg is projecting, like if it's kicking out this far forward, the tail should be bending more this way. In order to, make sure that muscle can still attach. But, yeah. Pretty neat. Get a little bit closer. Pretty awesome. What a cool thing to have. I can point something else out pretty cool right here. The metatarsals, which are the upper foot bones right here, are pinched together. So we call this the arctometatarsalgian condition. It just means the upper foot bones are squashed together like that for like a single like shock absorbing element. Rather than having the upper foot bones apart or like stresses can work on them independently, instead they're bundled up together to make. So this animal, at least when it was younger, like early on in the life of a Tyrannosaurus, it would have been a real runner. Really leggy, just a speedy, probably pursuit predator. And then later on in their life history, they really bulk up. Like they're a different animal in some cases. Like in some ways, they've got a totally different feel to them. Big adult, really fast runner, but man, they were speedsters when they were small. Very leggy, svelte. Yeah. And missing the gastrelli, of course, is Alexander Morrison. Yeah, that's true. The wishbone there in between the coracoids in the middle of the chest. There should be a V-shaped wishbone there, but at the time that this cast was made, I don't know if it was. You guys had a furcula, had a wishbone. Just incredibly robust. That tibia right there doesn't seem like it matches with other parts of the skeleton. It's so big and thick. Just nuts. The tib almost seems like it's longer than the... Yeah, look at these big caudal chevrons hanging down off of the tail. So these are also for muscle attachment. The tail would not have been this flexible in life, I suspect. In many dinosaurs, the tail is used for balance, especially in bipedal animals. In bipedal dinosaurs, ones that have to walk on just two legs, you got to have something to counterbalance the heavy front part of your body. So they've got a big heavy tail, but also the tail is a connection point for all of these muscles that help with walking and running. And so it's been tail. Don't think like a snake, think more like than that. Pretty neat. Cool that this is just here in the student union. Interesting pose too. To the side like that. See if I can replicate this pose. Something like that. But pretty neat. I'm trying to remember when I would do museum tours about T-Rex. Oh yeah, I was talking about the pubic boot. So you're looking at the hips right here for this animal. There's the femur, the thigh bone sticking out. You've got the ischium in the back, the ilia up top, and then you've got the pubes in front. All of these are paired. So you've got a right and a left for each of these different bones. And so right here, this big thing right there, one of the most common questions that I would get from museum visitors when I was like giving tours at various museums was, what is that? What's the big thing hanging down between the legs right there? And those are the pubes. Those big projections at the bottom, that's called the pubic boot. And so that presumably evolved for weight bearing. So when these animals would sit, they would kind of fold their legs up underneath them, you know, much like a chicken. When a chicken, you see like a hen laying on, sitting on her eggs, similar kind of thing. But with such a big, heavy animal, such a big torso, you got to make sure that, you know, stuff doesn't get crushed. And so that pubic boot right there, this big like keel on the underside, probably evolved for weight bearing. These guys had almost like a built-in chair. How cool is that? So we see this in tyrannosaurs. You don't see it as much in other big theropod dinosaurs. Big boot in, say, allosaurs or but in tyrannosaurs, it's pretty dramatic. Pretty neat. And other examples of the sitting. I think that's the best one. That sitting traits from St. George shows how these guys sat down. And that's from an early theropod dinosaur from the earliest Jurassic. This is kind of taken to an extreme. So, this is one of the very, very last of the non-bird dinosaurs. These guys lived here from about 68 maybe to about 66 million years ago. And this is one of the very last dinosaurs, except for birds, obviously. So when that asteroid struck 66 million years ago, dinosaurs that would have seen that and then been wiped out by that. So Tyrannosaurus in many ways, I think, there are a lot of paleontologists who are a little bit fed up with T-Rex. It just gets so much attention. Everybody talks about Tyrannosaurus. It's just such a, I don't know, you might even say overhyped. But at the same time, there are aspects of this animal that are truly superlative. It is one of the very biggest of the theropod dinosaurs. It's the biggest tyrannosaur. It's one of the very last of the non-bird dinosaurs. And just that skull is crazy, just how incredibly robust it is. For this year, one of my big projects has been 3D printing and assembling and smoothing and painting a life-size Tyrannosaurus skull, an adult Tyrannosaurus skull, and it is quite the undertaking. It very barely fits through the doorway when I'm trying to take it from room to room in my house. It's bonkers. It's just such a crazy piece of anatomy, that skull. So in many ways, this is kind of the pinnacle of theropod dinosaur evolution during the Mesozoic. Like, Tyrannosaurus is kind of the be-all, end-all. So, you know, there's... to complain about how T-Rex gets so much attention, but there's a reason for that. It's not all hype. Like, it's a truly remarkable animal. That's hard to argue with, I think. Yeah. Big fan of T-Rex's Rhacodactylus. It's a very cool animal. Yeah. And very cool Shumway. And Charlie's Dragon says T-Rex is impressive, but it's also like a dinosaur in it. I mean, dinosaurs everybody has heard of. It's I don't know, what are the big Dinosaurus? Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Brontosaurus. Nowadays, I guess people also know Velociraptor, thanks to Jurassic Park. And a lot of folks knew Spinosaurus as well. Spinosaurus has been getting a lot of attention over the past 20 years, with good reason. But yeah. In the UK, people love Diplodocus too, which is really funny, because Diplodocus is not from the UK. It's from Wyoming, right here. But, yeah, we can talk about that another time. And Brachiosaurus, yeah, I would say Brachiosaurus is probably a second tier one. But it would be one of the most popular of the second tier dinosaurs. But yeah. And Barinasuchus. Oh, very cool. That would be really neat, Alexander Morrison, if you wouldn't mind sending that. Yeah, just send it to me in a whisper. It'd be great. Anyway, good stuff. Let's go see. We've got 3 more big skeletons to look at. Dinosaurs and a marine reptile. Go do that. This building here. Oh, by the way, this is the T-Rex grill here. See, they are... Here, let's take a look from this. And yeah, this totally does look like AMNH 5027. I think that's the... So look at the... In the antorbital fenestra right there, I wish I had a laser pointer. Look, just forward of the eye, there's a big flange that shouldn't be there. If we look at the other side, the other antorbital won't be there. So the next time you see the Jurassic Park logo, you can look it up right now. There's like a weird bump coming off of the lacrimal bone. And that's that ectopterygoid that got... So that's how you can tell that this is AMNH 5027. This is the same skull, at least. Yeah, the really famous one that the Jurassic Park logo is based off of. Pretty neat. Anyway, sorry, it cut out for a second. Are we good now? Yeah. We're back? Okay. Did you catch the part about the ectopterygoid and that lump in front of the lacrimal? Just 5 seconds or so. Okay, cool. Anywho, neat stuff. And again, when you start to study you go, oh, or this is Stan or Sue or the Wonkle Rex, or this is giant marine reptile. Do that. Okay, we're back. Good. We're gonna walk past Foucault's pen. Yeah. I wish their bookstore were open right now. Dinosaur merch in there. It seems you can see it. Yeah. By the way, I recommend visiting here if you get the chance. This is such a kind of a hidden gem. Because you're really proud of their. On their website, they make a big deal out of how the most accessible.
Ontogeny.
All right, are we back now? There we go. Okay, good. Sorry about that. So walking to the other side of the building, it switched to a different router and a different network. So yeah. Anywho, this guy, one of everybody's favorite dinosaurs. Yeah. This is Stegosaurus. In fact, I recognize this specimen. I'm pretty sure this is a cast, so an exact molded and cast replica of the holotype specimen of Stegosaurus ungulatus, which is the largest species of Stegosaurus that I'm aware of. And I think this is, yeah, if it is the holotype for S. ungulatus, this would be a cast of YPM 1858. So this is a Yale Peabody Museum specimen. And there is that classic Stegosaurus skull right there. Very nice, yeah. And hey, Dyson Dinosaur, how are you doing? Welcome. Yeah. Holotype? Johnny Ian? I don't know what you mean, but the holotype specimen is the original name-bearing specimen of a given organism. So when you're naming a new kind of critter, whether it's a plant or an animal or whatever, you usually have to designate a holotype specimen. So that's the original, the type specimen, the name-bearing one. So anytime somebody wants to come back and compare a different specimen to yours to figure out if it's the same species, they compare it to the holotype. So this is, as far as I know, the holotype of Stegosaurus ungulatus here. Very cool. Excellent. In Rock Springs, Wyoming. Again, I'm going to be, or for anybody just joining us, Paleontologizing, my name is Danny Anduza. I'm a dinosaur paleontologist, and I'm on my way out to the field right now. We're going to be heading out to near Green River, Wyoming, but I thought I'd stop here at Western Wyoming Community College to show off some of the cool fossil displays that they have just out here in the public area. They make a big deal about this on their website, how these are the most publicly accessible dinosaur skeletons on Interstate 80, which is one of the biggest highways in North America. This is the most accessible collection of dinosaur skeletons on Interstate 80, anywhere between San Francisco and Chicago. It's pretty cool. And it's free to visit, too. You just come right off the highway and, yeah. So we're in an academic building at Western Wyoming Community College. And, yeah, it's pretty quiet right now because there's no classes being held at the moment. So it's just kind of us and these fossil displays, which is really cool. Pretty neat. Crimson Carnotaurus says you don't want those spikes going through you. Absolutely not. Now look at those tail spikes. And again, this is just the bony core right here too. So in life, these spikes would have been covered with a keratinous sheath, almost like a rhinoceros's horn or something like that. They would have been significantly longer and sharper than this right here. But even considering that, just this is impressive. I mean, look at the size of those spikes. We've got really good evidence that these were indeed used for defense because, well, A, this is a plant-eating animal, so it's not going to go impaling any prey items on the end of its tail. That head and those teeth are not built for eating other animals, especially not other dinosaurs. But we actually have direct evidence of these tail spikes being used for defense, and that there are dinosaurs like Allosaurus with grievous injuries to their bones, sometimes like big holes in the vertebrae. And, you know, somebody said, well, could those holes have been caused by the tail spikes of a stegosaur? So they actually tested it out. They're like, let's take a stegosaur spike, stick it into the hole in the vertebrae, and it's a perfect fit. So it shows that that Stegosaurus was defending itself against these dinosaurs like Allosaurus. This would have been a pretty formidable weapon here. Yeah, pretty neat. GP Bear says that's a cool study. You know, it's always fun when you can do something like that. Just like, does the spike fit? Yes, it does. You know, there's a beautiful kind of elegant simplicity there. Yeah. But yeah, and then these osteoderms, these plates on the back. It's long been debated what those were for on Stegosaurus. Again, like the tail spikes, they would have been covered by keratin in life. At least that's what we think now. But some older ideas for the purpose of the plates was, well, maybe they were used for defense. You know, maybe they were armor plating on the animal's back. When Othniel Charles Marsh first named Stegosaurus back in the 1870s, he gave it the name Stegosaurus, meaning roof lizard, because he thought that maybe the plates lay flat across the back like shingles on a roof to help protect from meat-eating dinosaurs trying to attack it from above. But we now recognize they didn't lie flat like that. This is not a roof. These are, well, they're sticking straight up like that. Very conspicuous. So another idea was, well, maybe they were used for temperature regulation. Maybe they're like the fins on a radiator for helping to dump excess heat. Or maybe they would help the animal warm up in the morning. It could just turn its plates toward the sun and, like solar panels, heat up its blood. But that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense because Stegosaurus is not the only stegosaur. There's a bunch of other members of this family. Things like Kentrosaurus, Twajangosaurus, Huayangosaurus. There's a whole bunch of other stegosaurs, and they all seem to have smaller, narrower plates. Not a lot of surface area there, so the idea that the plates evolved for thermoregulation just doesn't seem to make a great deal of sense. But one thing that's really interesting about those plates is that they have this really interesting wrinkly texture there, and you can see that on some of them, I hope. I hope the camera's picking that up. But that wrinkly kind of texture, those seem to be blood vessel grooves. So that kind of went to that idea that, oh, maybe the blood is going up there like the fins in a radiator. But the thing is, the grooves don't go up and then curve back around and come down. They just go up and they terminate. And this is a lot like the same pattern that you see in creatures like, say, toucans or hornbills, different kinds of birds that have got big, flamboyant-looking beaks. And often these are colored, like that's a display structure on this animal. Like that really garish appearance evolved for display seems to be the case with stegosaurs as well. So it could be that those plates, it probably is that those, again, like the tail spikes, they would have been covered by a horny, like keratinous sheath over the top, so the plates would be even larger and longer, maybe sharper than you see here. And presumably brightly colored, like the beak of a toucan or something like that. If you're going to exert all of this energy, all of these nutrients, all of this effort to develop these huge garish plates like that, chances are they would be brightly colored because it's a visual display, you know? So all of these pictures of Stegosaurus being just kind of a drab, dull gray, and then the plates are an even drabber, duller gray, I don't think that's very likely. I think this animal would have been really brightly colored, really showy. It would have been, would have garnered a lot of attention, I would say. So yeah. Yeah, neon stegosaurus is a Spartan. It's possible, you know. We know that dinosaurs had full color vision. At least we have every reason to think that they did because their closest living relatives, the crocodilians, they have full color vision. And birds, who are the descendants of theropod dinosaurs, they have full color vision. They can see more colors and hues than we can as humans. They've got tetrachromatic rather than trichromatic color vision. Their color vision is significantly better than ours. We have every reason to think that dinosaurs would have been the same way. And would have been very visual animals too. Yeah, and that orbit right there is actually a decent size for a skull that's only this big. These guys probably would have had pretty decent vision. And if the plates are for displaying to other members of the same species, which is usually the case, that's usually how displays work. Yeah, stegosaurs presumably would have had decent enough vision to be able to discern those plates at a distance. If you're going through all of this crazy kind of display structure, chances are you're a pretty visual animal, and these guys probably were. Yeah. I want to emphasize too the difference in length between these really long hind legs and these fairly short forelimbs. Like a stegosaur arm is not that much longer than my arm, which is nuts, because we're talking about an animal that's 20, 25 feet long. Its arms are fairly short, really robust, so clearly they could, and clearly they're walking around on these, like these limbs are definitely for locomotion. This is not, it's not like these animals are bipedal. And yet their hind limbs are so much longer than their forelimbs. So the question is, why? There's one idea that these guys are mostly feeding at ground level, and so they kind of need their head close to the ground in order to be able to do that. But this skeleton doesn't really show, I think it might even be missing some cervical vertebrae. Stegosaurs, especially Stegosaurus, had a slightly longer neck than this. It may have actually been at almost, not quite like a swan neck pose, but more upright than you see right here. So yeah, the idea that they just need their head super close to the ground doesn't really make a great deal of sense for why you'd have such a disparity between the length of the forelimbs and the hind limbs. There's another idea that maybe these guys would have frequently adopted a tripod kind of stance. So they would rear up on their hind legs, maybe rest that tail on the ground, and that way they could bring their head and neck up to kind of nibble on tree, like the leaves of trees. Maybe they're getting at tree ferns, maybe they're getting at cycad fruit or something like that. They do have a very narrow snout. So for an animal this big, the head is very small and the snout is very narrow. Stegosaurs were probably very picky eaters, probably very selective in their browsing. They're probably only going for the choicest bits of vegetation. That would explain why they've got such a narrow snout, and maybe would explain the disparity between the forelimbs and the hind limbs. If you've got really long hind limbs, big bulky tail, short forelimbs, short-ish neck, small head, this might be the perfect kind of body plan to just kind of, walking along, and then you rear up on your hind legs, you eat some leaves from a medium-sized tree, you get some fruits, you're getting the choicest, most succulent bits of vegetation, and then you move on and do the same thing again. But maybe that's what these guys are doing. They do certainly have these huge iliac projections up there. Like the anterior part of their ilium is just huge, and presumably they would have had enormous thigh muscles right here. Just the sort of thing that you would want to do if you're rearing up on your hind legs, in order to rest your forelimbs on a tree and eat leaves and stuff. So it would make sense. Yeah. And GP Bear says, why would a giant dinosaur only eat prime leaves? I mean, those are going to be the easiest to digest and the most nutritious. So you're kind of going for quality over quantity, if that makes sense. Rather than having a big wide mouth where you're just eating all kinds of low quality plant material, you're just getting the most nutritious, just the best stuff. That's probably what these guys were doing, I would imagine. But I don't know. That's the thing about, when we're doing science, we need to be able to test these ideas, and you got to come up with a way to run a test there in order for it to be anything more than just speculation, But this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I'd love to be able to do a project on this at some point. Yeah. Lilith Farton says, I like their plates up top. Yeah, me too. Really cool. Let's see how many we got here. I know I think Stegosaurus steenops is supposed to have 17 dorsal plates. Here on our Stegosaurus, pretty sure this is Stegosaurus ungulatus. Stegosaurus species. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. The biggest plate is the one just behind the hips right there. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Interesting. I don't know if we have... I remember that 17 figure from when I was a kid. I'm not sure how sure we are about that. Yeah. Another thing you'll notice here on our Stegosaur, I'm not sure if this is actually genuine to the animal's anatomy or if it's just because this is like a really old cast and parts of it are outdated. But the transverse processes on the caudal vertebrae are practically non-existent. Those projections that go out laterally, out to the sides, the ones that, they attach to the caudofemoralis muscle. We don't have a big fourth trochanter on our Stegosaurus femur right there. There's no big bump like we saw on our Camptosaurus or on our Tyrannosaurus. It's just kind of flat. And so that caudofemoralis muscle that would normally run to those transverse processes are barely there. Which might have something to do with the lifestyle of this animal and those spikes. So if their primary means of defense is whipping their tail from side to side to try and intimidate predators or maybe even get them with those spikes, it would make sense not to have big transverse processes. If this tail is built for lateral motion like that, those transverse processes can get in the way. So here they're just pretty much not here. So that makes a lot of sense, given how this animal is built, given those tail spikes, all of that. Pretty cool. Yeah. Neat stuff. Lee Trace is listening at work. Thanks for streaming. You bet, Lee Trace. It's good to see you here. Anyhow, functional morphology, yeah. And Golganek says, could they have dug out some insects with those leaves? I'm not sure what you mean, Golganek. I've heard very speculative takes about thyreophoran dinosaurs, armored dinosaurs, that like, oh yeah, maybe they are eating insects or something like that. It would make sense for ankylosaurs or stegosaurs to do that, but I don't know. The teeth of Stegosaurus are fairly simple and what we would call like leaf-shaped. They've got little lobes on them. They seem like kind of your typical, almost like a land iguana type tooth for just kind of crudely slicing vegetation. We've got a huge gut on this animal here, and there would have been a lot of digestion happening after the crude chewing. I don't know if you could even really call it chewing. If they're mostly using those teeth just for slicing vegetation, then yeah. But anyway, very, very cool. And what's interesting is you can see on this cast, there's a few little like circles right there, little rivets. Those are not part of the bone. That must have been, they cast that when they were casting the original specimen. And again, I'm pretty sure this is a Yale Museum specimen, YPM 1858, the holotype of Stegosaurus ungulatus. Yeah, and you see some more of them right there on the ilium as well. Yeah, almost look like little washers. Pretty cool. Yeah, neat stuff. So the original of this is still on display at Yale, and they've recently put it into like a more modern pose. So you've got the tail held out straight behind the animal, not dragging on the ground like this. Again, this is a very old-fashioned pose. But that tail in the air, kind of swishing around those tail spikes, saying, hey, don't mess with me, allosaurs, or whoever else is around. And then, again, it should have probably a slightly longer neck, held a little bit more upright. So this is kind of an antiquated pose, but it does show off some key elements of this animal, and it is still very impressive. It'd be tricky to put a Stegosaurus skeleton on display and not have it be impressive, you know? It's just an inherently impressive animal. It's just very, very charismatic. You can see why it's one of the most popular dinosaurs in pop culture, why it's so many people's favorite. Yeah. Good stuff. Maybe they were like cats, and that a positive mood was high tail if they missed on something good snacks, so low tail snow energy. I don't know. It's a good question. Be a difficult one to test, short of acquiring a time machine, you know? Yeah. And so this does have the more modern depiction of the plate's arrangement, too. Oh, and holy cow. Spartan, thank you so much for those gifts. I really appreciate it. That's very generous of you. There are a bunch of people who won't have to worry about any ads for the entire time that I'm out doing fieldwork in Wyoming now. That's excellent timing. Thank you, thank you. Good stuff. Arius, thank you for the tier 3 sub. 35 months is a long time. Brilliant. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Ontogeny.
Yeah. And there you go, Halle Berry, yeah. Excellent. Oh, I'm looking forward to doing some more museum streams this year, so stay tuned. Anyhow, yeah, what was this thing about the plates? So yeah, it was, there have been a lot of different attempts to try and get the arrangement correct for Stegosaurus plates. For a lot of Stegosaurus, we still don't really know what the proper arrangement is. The specimens we have are too incomplete, and they're often disarticulated, so all the bones fell apart after death. And so it's hard to see, it's hard to be able to say how exactly the plates would line up. How are they arranged in life? But there have been a few really good specimens of Stegosaurus that have allowed us to kind of figure that out to a certain extent. Like I said, the earliest depictions of Stegosaurus showed the plates lying flat on its back like the tiles of a roof. We now know that is not correct. After that, when it was realized that the plates stood upright, there was the idea, well, they must have been paired, right? Must have been just, the first two standing next to each other, and then the second two, and then the third two, and so on and so forth until you get down to the tail, side by side like that. You often have this in a lot of different animals. You have bilateral symmetry. So, the right side matches the left side. But with Stegosaurus, the plates are not the same size. It's not like you have two next to each other that are the same size. And then there were some special that showed the plates more or less like they were in life. And now the idea is that these plates weren't being bilaterally symmetrical. Instead, they're staggered like this. So you have one going left, one going right, one going left, one going right. They're steadily increasing in size as you get up there to the hips, which would have been the highest point on the animal anyway. Yeah, I think that comports pretty well with the whole display idea. So the biggest plates over the hips, and then they get progressively smaller as you get closer to those tail spikes. Yeah. Very cool. And Victorious, thank you for the gifts up there. Excellent. Yeah. Good stuff. And there's a nearly complete one at the M&H. Yes, indeed, Neverwinterful. That might be... Is that the specimen that they call the roadkill? Or is that the one at the Smithsonian? But there's a beautiful Stegosaurus skeleton that was found in articulation. And that was, I think, the key specimen in really helping us figure out how these plates would have been arranged as the animal was alive. So... very cool stuff. Man, we've been streaming for 1 hour and 40 minutes so far. That's longer than I thought. Yeah. Nice. Anyway, Stegosaurus. Everybody loves Stegosaurus, including me. Just... what a cool animal, Seriously. This brings a smile to my face. Love Stegosaurus. Kind of an understudied group of dinosaurs, though. Yeah. Here, what we're going to do now is we'll go check out a non-dinosaur, and then we'll probably go finish up with Triceratops at the end. Let's go over here. So this is a really impressive display right here. So I want to emphasize very strongly, this is not a dinosaur. This is a marine reptile. This is a kind of elasmosaur. It might be Elasmosaurus, or it might be Thalassomedon, or I don't think it's Elzadasaurus. I'm not sure. I don't work on these guys. Again, this is not a dinosaur. It is an elasmosaur. And that is a crazy long neck right there. Just an insane number of neck vertebrae. Just the neck alone, I think, is over 20 feet long. So that's almost 7 meters. Just the neck. Crazy. Now, when Elasmosaurus was first described, it was named by Edward Drinker Cope, who was, Othniel Charles Marsh's big rival during the Bone Wars. And an elasmosaur may have been what helped kick off the Bone Wars in the first place, because when Marsh was first naming this animal, he made a bit of a goof, and that he put the head on the wrong end. So imagine putting the skull right here on the end of the tail, and then you've got this big barrel-shaped torso, and then you just have a crazy long tail right there. What's actually the neck? He got the animal backwards.
Ontogeny.
And Othniel Charles Marsh pointed that out. And, it became really obvious that, Cope really goofed on this. And Marsh never let him forget it. That's part of what kicked off their decades-long feud. That's partly what fueled the Bone Wars from the 1870s through the 1890s. But yeah. And I mean, you can almost understand that mistake when you just see how bonkers this animal is. I mean, it has an absurdly long neck. It's almost difficult to imagine what this animal was doing when it was alive. Just crazy. Like, what are the evolutionary pressures that cause you to develop such an incredibly long neck? The old idea is that the neck was really flexible, almost like a snake or something like that, and that it could, kind of maneuver its neck into a school of fish and, kind of swish its head back and forth and just be able to nab whatever it was trying to catch. But when you actually look at the vertebrae themselves, they don't show a great deal of flexibility. So for one thing, you've got these huge neural spines right here. So that's the projection off the top of the vertebra. The spinal cord runs through the neural canal, so you can see a little hole right there in the vertebra. So these neural spines project upward off of the vertebral centra. And as you can tell, they're so big that they don't really allow for a lot of flexibility. So this animal would not be able to kind of adopt that swan-like neck pose like in the famous surgeon's photo of the Loch Ness Monster. They couldn't do that. These neural spines would knock together. They really restrict the amount of kind of ventral flexion that you can do. So the neck would have been held out fairly straight. You do see that the neural spines get shorter and shorter as you get toward the head. So the front part of the neck would have been the most flexible. But back here, there's like hardly any play at all going up or down to the neck, which is really interesting.
Ontogeny.
But you don't really have very strong lateral projections off of this either. So it could be that the neck was pretty flexible from side to side, but not up and down. And that would make a lot of sense. A lot of animals today that are actively pursuing fishes in the water, a lot of tetrapods who primarily eat fishes, and they're pursuing them in the water column, they're often snapping laterally from side to side. That may be what these guys were doing too. Yeah. And Bush Doctor says keep the body hidden and use that neck to snap up unsuspecting fish like a long-necked turtle. That's an idea, yeah. But I think, long-necked turtles, they might use suction feeding in order to catch their prey, and they don't have big teeth. These guys have got these really, really long, kind of forward projecting teeth. This is kind of an old skull too. I think we've got better examples. The teeth like should be projecting forward more than they are here. But those teeth would interlock when the jaw would close.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, so would have been great for holding slippery fish in place and keeping them from escaping. But how is it actually, pursuing those fish in the first place? I don't know. It's a tough question to answer. I've even heard some people who work on marine reptiles say that maybe these guys are mostly sifting through the sandy bottom of the ocean, looking for stuff that's kind of hiding there in the sand. And, the interlocking teeth idea does comport with that pretty well, but I don't know. It's kind of difficult to imagine these guys evolving this super long neck if all they're really doing is, well, I don't know, maybe it's like a sweep feeding thing, like with diplodocid sauropods. I don't know. I just find these guys incredibly interesting and mysterious. Like, why in the world do you evolve this crazy long neck? Yeah. Lunisaurus says sea giraffe, but that's the thing, is that giraffes only have 7 vertebrae in their necks, and their necks are even less flexible than this. What are these guys doing, Here, let's count the number of neck vertebrae here too. We know that giraffes have 7, just like we do. Nearly all mammals have just 7 neck vertebrae. But here, we'll say that the neck starts, we'll say it starts right here. It's kind of difficult to figure out, like, where do the dorsal vertebrae end and the cervical vertebrae begin. But I'm going to say, I'm going to say right here, actually. First cervical vertebra. So we can count the neural spines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, and then with the atlas, that should be 63 vertebrae in the neck. This is not the record for an elasmosaur. I think it's Alberta nectes holds the record at 72 neck vertebrae. Or is it 76? I forget. Somebody look it up. But, yeah, truly impressive. What did I say here? 56? Yeah. So there were elasmosaurs that evolved even more neck vertebrae than this, which is, again, very impressive. Such a cool animal. And what's interesting, too, is that different groups of reptiles like this, during embryology, they can, one way that they get more vertebrae or something is just by multiplying that part. We see this in the limbs as well on these guys. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits right here, but they've got way more than your normal complement of phalanges inside. So, what is it on, for like the hallux, the thumb, you've usually got like what, 2 or 3 different phalanges? And these guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So they're able to just multiply the number of bones in their flippers and in their necks too. That's how they evolved these hyper elongate necks and these big flippers for propulsion. Pretty neat. Yeah, awesome stuff. It does make me wonder too, like, how in the world are these guys getting enough oxygen to power their bodies if they've got these 2 little nostrils right up there at the front of their snout and they've got this enormous long neck? I wonder if they had some sort of soft tissue mechanism or something for just like, actually they're probably breathing through their mouths when they come up to breathe, because these are air-breathing animals. As reptiles, they breathe air. They can't breathe in the water. They're not ray fin fishes or something. Just like whales, they would have to come up and breathe every once in a while. I wonder if they're just taking in massive gulps of oxygen and just somehow like forcing down their trachea into the rest of their body. Like, how are they doing that? When you've got a neck that's 20 plus feet long, like almost 7 meters, how in the world are you getting enough air to the rest of your body? I don't know, you know? I wonder if they're marine reptile specialists, people who work on plesiosaurs who've mulled this over and might have hypotheses for it. But yeah, really neat. Modern meerkat says maybe they died out because they suffocated. Well, I mean, these guys were successful for tens of millions of years, so they're clearly doing something right. And they lived all over the world, too. So we've got elasmosaurs like this from here in North America. I think we've got elasmosaurs from Japan. I think we've got some from the Middle East. They lived all over the world. We've got some from Antarctica as well, from New Zealand. Yeah, remarkably successful animals. They were everywhere, so they were clearly doing something right. And it was only because of that asteroid impact 66 million years ago that they died out. Elasmosaurs like this seem to have lived right up until the very end of the Cretaceous. It took an extinction event that had wiped out 80% of life on Earth in order to end the reign of these guys too. So yeah, what a cool animal. Yeah. And doesn't places too much of climate change and ecosystem failure due to the asteroid impact for them to bear the change? Yeah, so these guys are, they're predators. So you see them here going after these fishes. It's neat. And presumably they're eating fish, squid, stuff like that. When you had the food web essentially collapse because of that asteroid impact, because of the sun being blocked out by dust and soot in the air, the whole marine food web just obliterated. So all of the photosynthetic photosynthetic plankton, phytoplankton, without any sun, they died out. The zooplankton that eat the phytoplankton, they died because suddenly there's no phytoplankton. And all the little invertebrates and fishes that eat the phytoplankton, they died out. And the larger fishes died out, and up and up and up the food chain until you get to these guys. They no longer have any food. They die out too. So yeah, when people think of the asteroid impact at the end of the Cretaceous, they think about tsunamis, they think about forest fires, they think about, tektites raining down from the sky and stuff, but they're not often thinking about what's happening in the oceans as well. You have this kind of impact winter that would just completely dismantle the marine food web too. Knock-on effects that extend up to, these enormous guys. It's really tragic. Yeah. No food, no stability, equal mass diet. Exactly, Alexander Morrison, yeah. Yeah. Ms. Art Rule says, do you think they would fight with their necks like giraffes? I don't know. We don't have any evidence to suggest that I'm aware of. I'm not sure how these guys would have competed for male giraffes will do that. Well, they'll use their necks for combat. Well, they'll just kind of like swing their heads at one another at the end of these long muscular necks, and they basically do that until one of them gets too tired or too hurt, and then the victor gets to hold that territory and be with all the females and everything. Are these guys doing the same thing? I kind of doubt it. But I don't know. Yeah. One thing that I think is really interesting is the shape of the tail here. So we've been talking about those transverse processes, these extensions that come out laterally out of the caudal vertebrae. And here they're really pronounced. So really, really strong transverse processes would have been lot of muscles attaching right there. I almost wonder if the tail was almost like a rudder. You can tell the neural spines here are also still really robust, really thick. They take up a lot of space, so the tail would not be flexing up and down very much. It's not built for that, but it could go from side to side a little bit more. But the transverse processes are so long, it would have been so muscular. I wonder if they would have had a fleshy kind of like rudder fin type deal on the tail that would have allowed them to steer a little bit better. Because this tail, just the structure of it says to me, like, this is something that's really, really strong, but not particularly flexible. It could flex a bit from side to side, but it's short and stout, strong. That feels like a rudder, you know? Again, I don't work on these guys. This is not my area of expertise, but, you know, I do a bit of functional morphology, and that to me says, oh yeah, rudder. So who knows? But what's cool is these enormous flippers right here, and this is like as long as I am tall. These arm flippers here. These would have been the animal's primary means of propulsion. So kind of like, if you've ever seen a penguin swimming through the water, they're almost like flying through the water. They're flapping those wings that they have. You can almost think of these guys as like a double penguin. So they've got one set of wings in the front and another set in the back. And maybe they would have alternated them. As the ones in the front are coming up, the ones in the back are going down. I don't know. We honestly need more work on this kind of thing. There's a few researchers who have actually built like robotic models to try and figure out like what's the pattern for swimming here. How do you do a double penguin kind of swimming deal? I think it's still pretty mysterious. So anyway, the point is there's so much work left to be done on these guys. We've known about elasmosaurs since the 1870s, and yet so much about them is still so mysterious, which is exciting. There's so much out there still yet to be discovered. There's so many papers yet to be written. There's so many students who could do their masters or PhDs on these guys. I just think they're incredibly cool. This might actually be like my favorite display here. I know I'm a dinosaur guy, but this elasmosaur is really something special. Yeah. Pretty neat. Yeah. Good stuff. I want to walk around one more time just to give you a sense for how big this critter is. It's such a privilege to be here in person. Again, if you ever get a chance to visit Western Wyoming Community College, it's a special place. And it's right off the highway, right off Highway 80. Yeah, those big coracoids right there, huge muscle attachments for these big, powerful forelimbs. Big barrel-shaped body. Yeah, super cool. Really neat. Yeah. Look at that neck. Just bonkers. What an absurd animal. And yet they were clearly doing something right. They were so successful. Tens of millions of years doing their thing. And if they hadn't gotten wiped out at the end of the Cretaceous because of that asteroid impact, I wonder how much longer their necks would have gotten. Because Albertinectes, who I think was it 76 vertebrae in the neck? I think that's one of the last ones. I think Albertinectes is it from the Campanian or is it from the Maastrichtian? Is it from the very end of the Mesozoic? If it is, then, one must wonder how much longer those necks would have gotten if they'd been allowed to continue to evolve. At some point, surely they'd reach some kind of ceiling. But, yeah. And Diagonal says, what are those underwater plants supposed to be? I think it's supposed to be like seagrasses, which I'm not sure seagrasses actually existed during the Mesozoic. Seagrasses are a kind of angiosperm. And I don't know if angiosperms would really spread to the oceans by the end of the Cretaceous. So, yeah. But anyway, I do like the way that they did this, where they're kind of obscuring the supports for this. So rather than just doing the typical thing that you might do with an elasmosaur skeleton and hanging it from the ceiling via some really strong, steel wires like that, instead it's supported via these, and the supports are kind of hidden here, which is really neat. You can see one of the support wires coming off of the femur there and going into the seagrass. It's neat stuff. It's a creative way to mount this. See another support right there. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. Not just smart, clever, says Kleber. I agree. But I need one more look at that skull. Then we'll move on to our last skeleton. Move on to Triceratops over here. Yeah. Pretty cool. Man, gotta love elasmosaurs. They're so neat. All right, one more, our last one. Yeah. Oh, if they had survived, would we be here? Says Digital Deck. Well, that extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous is the reason why we're here in a lot of ways. So if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. Yeah. Anyway, last but not least, Triceratops. So this is, if any of you have ever been to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, this is that same Triceratops specimen that they have on display there. I think the original is actually from northern Wyoming, from the Lance Formation. So, yeah, kind of a home state hero here. Triceratops. Triceratops is also I think the official state dinosaur of Wyoming. But yeah, one of the very largest and the last of the ceratopsids, the horned dinosaurs. Pretty cool. Take a look at that skull. And what's interesting here is, so this is cast from the original, which is again in New York, but some of the metal supports have actually made their way into the cast. So you see right there, this must be cast in resin, but originally it was metal. Holding the horns on right there. They had some wire. Yeah. And you see that here on the femur too. Yeah. Where that looks like it's metal, and it's been painted like it's metal, but I'm sure it's actually resin. They couldn't remove the original mounts from there for the casting process, so they just cast it in place. I've seen this same specimen at a number of other museums. The museum in Cleveland, Ohio, has got a cast of this guy too. Really famous specimen. So that often reproduced painting by Charles R. Knight of T-Rex versus Triceratops. That Triceratops is based on this specimen right here. And the T-Rex is based on AMNH 5027, whose skull we saw on the T-Rex mount over there in the cafeteria area. Yeah, pretty cool. Now, we've talked a bit, I think a good deal before, about Triceratops and Torosaurus. It's a big controversy in dinosaur paleontology. Are they the same dinosaur? Are they different? Is Torosaurus just a super mature Triceratops? Is it a mature Triceratops from, earlier in the Maastrichtian? There's still a lot of debate about that. But you talk to some of the folks who are proponents of the idea that Torosaurus is a different dinosaur, and they might say that this is actually Torosaurus and not Triceratops. To me, that's a clue that, like, hey, these animals are similar enough that maybe they're the same thing, if it's really difficult to tell who's who. But I've heard people say, well, the nose looks kind of like Torosaurus, and so do the horns. And that frill, when it was first found, was apparently so incredibly thin that there may have actually been fenestrae in it. So there may have actually been openings in the frill. The bone was so thin that they basically couldn't excavate it without it breaking. And so in order to build the original display in New York, they just filled in the holes, which is why it looks so smooth there. That's why you don't have a lot of like diagnostic bone texture It's just smooth along the frill for the most part because a lot of that is
ontogeny,
plaster filling it in. So yeah, it's you talk to some of the people who are Torosaurus proponents and they'd be like, oh yeah, we shouldn't be calling it Triceratops, we should be calling it Torosaurus. It's an interesting idea, and this is a debate that's probably going to continue for years or decades into the future. But we'll be talking about that again, probably later this summer. Someone was asking, where is it? Shoulder? And this is it right here. There's the shoulder girdle. Coracoid and scapula. Here's the humerus, the upper arm bone. So there's the shoulder joint right there. Yeah. Yeah. And then big barrel-shaped torso right here. So would have had just a ton of guts in there to help process the vegetation that this animal is eating. But ceratopsids also had a pretty serious kind of apparatus for cutting up plants. These guys actually could chew their food. They've got proper chewing teeth. They're hard to see in this mount here. But yeah, they've got those teeth that would shear past one another, almost like like garden shears or something like that. But far more serious than that. These guys are probably capable of like chopping down small trees just by biting them. You look at that beak right there, and you see the texture, that kind of rough, almost wrinkly texture. Again, like the Stegosaurus plates that we saw. That's indicative of blood vessel supply, like nutrient supply for a keratinous sheath over it. So like a big robust beak made of keratin over the surface of that. It made this beak really sharp. And you see a similar kind of texture on the horns too. You've got these big long grooves like that. This is classic Triceratops horn texture. In life, these horns would have been significantly longer with that keratinous sheath over them. So just try to imagine that. It's impressive just with the bony core, but in life, that would have been nuts. Yeah. Well, we even see some of that same texture along the frill too, so chances are the frill on Triceratops would have also had a keratinous sheath over it as well. So I would not be surprised if these guys had really bright coloration like you see on a lot of birds that have elaborate head structures, things like toucans. Think about how colorful the bill of a toucan is. It's got a very similar texture under that keratinous sheath. These guys may have had the same thing basically over their whole head. It's really cool to think about. Again, people for over a century now have really liked to reconstruct dinosaurs like Triceratops with really drab colors, brownish gray or grayish green, or just kind of drab, boring. No, these guys probably would have been much more brightly colored, especially like, I don't know, males during the mating season. They would have been really garish, I would imagine. Here again, you've got the tail kind of dragging along like that. Yeah, a really old-fashioned mount here with the front limbs sprawling out to the sides and the tail basically contacting the ground. Wouldn't have been like this in life. These guys would have had a much more upright stance. That tail would be held out straight behind it and then just like a bit of a droop, but it wouldn't be dragging on the ground. And then those forelimbs would be almost like that of an elephant, kind of directly underneath the body. So this animal would have been taller in life than you see right here. It's almost like it's doing a push-up or something, trying to bring its chest down to the ground. This is an old idea about the stance of ceratopsid dinosaurs. Nowadays we realize they should be much more upright than this. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and Creatrix Brent, how are you doing? Hello. Andromeda Creates, thank you for the raid. Welcome to Paleontologizing. Good to have you here. Yeah. Just checking out some of the skeleton mounts here at Western Wyoming Community College. This is their Natural History Museum here. Very nice. So if any of you are ever traveling through Wyoming on Interstate 80, make sure you drop by here. They make a big deal on the website about how these are the most publicly accessible dinosaur skeletons on interstate anywhere between Chicago and San Francisco. And having driven from San Francisco a few days ago, I can confirm, yes. So this is a great little place to stop by if you ever get the chance. Yeah. And are the horns empty inside? No, so these are the horn cores right here, and they are solid. Or actually, hang on, let me think about that for a second. I think some of the bony horn cores might hollow out late in ontogeny, so as the animal is maturing, they might start to hollow out a bit. But I'm not sure. The person to ask about that would be like John Scannella or Denver Fowler, who've both published a lot of papers on Triceratops. Yeah. Yeah, I want to say that late in ontogeny they do tend to hollow out. But yeah. And Salamander says borrowing calcium from the horn core for other bone building projects. It's, yeah, a possibility. Also, we think that, when I say we, I mean people who are proponents of the Torosaurus is Triceratops idea. We think that later on in ontogeny you've got these big hollows, the fenestrae that form there in the frill. Probably to make it more lightweight, but also maybe they're borrowing the calcium from that for something else. It's certainly possible. Yeah. Anywho, yeah. Good stuff. Digital Dax says, I've been wondering if any dinosaurs ever really had a lizard-like appearance, or were they all more bird-like? So that's the thing, is that birds are just one kind of dinosaur. We think about birds today, they've all got feathers, they all have a typically kind of birdy shape. But you go back into the Mesozoic, and you get lots and lots of other different kinds of dinosaur too. And they would have had a really wide variance and a really wide range of appearances. A lot of dinosaurs did have feathers. We don't have evidence that dinosaurs like Triceratops had feathers. We've got no evidence for feathers on ceratopsids yet. Or frankly, any kind of ceratopsian. So yeah, it's possible they would have had kind of downy feathers like a baby chick when they were first hatched. But we don't really know. Yeah. So would they look lizardy, though? It depends on what you mean by lizardy. Dinosaurs like Triceratops, we know, did have scaly skin. But I don't know, if you were to take a time machine back to Wyoming 66 million years ago and see a Triceratops walking around doing its Triceratops thing, I don't know if you would see that and go, oh, that looks like a lizard. I doubt it. I don't think anything about it would say lizard to you in particular. You might even think it looks like a big, weird, flightless, featherless bird or something. I don't know. I'm trying to anticipate what you would say upon seeing a living dinosaur, and I don't know you well enough. But yeah. That's the thing about non-bird dinosaurs is, yeah, a crazy diversity of shapes and sizes and appearances, even just like skin textures and stuff like that. Yeah, birds by comparison are almost kind of boring and uniform when you compare them to all the different body shapes and sizes and morphologies of non-avian dinosaurs. But I will say, though, if you're trying to imagine Mesozoic dinosaurs as living animals, your best starting point is birds. Think of dinosaurs as big, weird, terrestrial, sometimes featherless, almost always flightless birds. And that'll get you closer than thinking about them as lizards or something like that. That'll mislead you. Lizards are ectothermic, so cold-blooded. They've got a sprawling posture to their limbs. They're not particularly social animals. They're not necessarily the most intelligent creatures. Lizards are very good at doing what they do, but they're not a good analog for dinosaurs. Especially like particularly bird-like dinosaurs like your theropods, many of which had feathers. And that's where birds evolved from, was from feathered dinosaurs. Anyhow, I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Anywho, yeah. Good stuff. We've been, shoot, 2.25 hours so far we've been streaming. Let me go back up by the Stegosaurus and I think we'll wrap this up. I've got to check in with the rest of my crew. Hopefully they're already here in town, or they may have already left for camp, so I gotta figure that out. But I felt like this is a really nice kind of quick impromptu stream and a wonderful way to kind of start off our field season here. Again, I'll be out here in Wyoming for the next month digging up dinosaurs live on stream. So I'm glad you're here with me, and yeah, hopefully I can do another stream tomorrow after we get camp set up, but we'll see. Let's see who else is here on Twitch at the moment. Open up the Twitch app. Here we go. Who else have we got? This went a little bit earlier than usual. Here, why don't we go right into Alveus Sanctuary, why don't we? I think that'll be good. Okay. Alveus Sanctuary. Hopefully that worked. But yeah. For tuning in with me today. Thanks for spending some time with me here at Western Wyoming Community College. Checking out these awesome fossil displays. This has been, it's been really neat. What a treat. And what a lovely thing to have here in the community. I'm a little bit jealous. But yeah, I'm going to be out digging dinosaurs for the next month, so if you haven't followed yet, please do now. It's going to be some excellent science outreach. I cannot wait. Showing you firsthand what it's like to dig up dinosaurs in the Badlands of Wyoming, near the town of Green River. It's going to be great. Anyway. The moderators to the new followers, gifters, everybody, thank you so much for making these streams possible. Appreciate each and every one. I'll see you soon.
And then hide and seek.
All right. Mm-hmm.